Okay, everybody, welcome to the Edge of Adventure podcast. My name is Adam Asher, and I want to welcome everybody who is listening. And also, we've got some viewers on YouTube. You can join us on YouTube if you want to see a little behind the scenes of what's going on today. But again, yes, my name is Adam, and it's great to have everybody with us today. My guest is Steve Kasha, who is the CEO and founder of SERV International.
Correct.
Steve, thanks for being here, first of all.
Man, thank you for coming out today and giving me the opportunity just to have a conversation.
The first time I met you, I was like, I anticipated I was going to like you because I know a little bit about what SERV does and fascinated by it. But when I saw the type bracelets that you're wearing, and I thought, you know what, I gotta get to the story behind those bracelets. So we'll ask that question a little bit later on in the podcast. But anyway, again, Steve, thanks for being here, and thanks for what you do with SERV International.
Oh, thank you.
So for someone who is listening and they have never heard of SERV,
right?
What is it?
Oh, wow. SERV is a nonprofit organization that gives people the opportunity to experience Christ through missions, feeding people around the world, taking mission trips, a little bit of everything.
Okay, so taking mission trips, what does that mean? So if maybe you're in the West, you're in the U.S. or something,
right.
They work with you guys. You go where and do what? So
what we do is we have an orphanage over in the northwest corner of Kenya. It's up near Sudan, Ethiopia, Uganda. It's right on the border, kind of up in the no man's land. So what we do is we take mission trips to Kenya. We also take mission trips to Dominican. We've been in Mexico in the past. But right now our primary focus is probably Kenya.
What is life like up there? I mean, the first thing I would think of is there must be great need, but
right.
Never having been myself, you tell me what it's like there.
You know, I think that what we'd want to do is probably paint the worst picture that you can paint, and then kind of, backtrack on that. What I mean by that is there's tremendous need. I mean, it's a beautiful country. It's diverse. The people are fantastic, but there's always a need. I mean, I think any place that you go in the world, you're always going to find that need. And kind of what we did about 10 years ago is kind of dialed in on that. We kind of dialed in on had an opportunity to go over there and see firsthand what was going on. Saw some devastation. Saw hunger. Saw death. Saw starvation. And, kind of got a really cool story that surrounds that whole thing.
I notice on your website, which, by the way, is, how would somebody find it?
SERV1.org. So it's SERVONE.org.
Okay, so the word SERV minus the E is just SERV.
Correct.
ONE as in the number one.org.
Correct.
SERV1.org. I notice on your website that you put a lot of emphasis on food.
Correct.
Why does it start with food?
It really goes back to a vision I was given real young. Had a vision to feed people when I was about 18 years old. Kind of started the process of helping where I could along the way. And about 10 years ago, let me just tell you this real quick. It was just a real quick story. But about 10 years ago, I had a man who came over to Kenya. Over to the United States from Kenya. And I went and listened to him speak at a church. And I sat there and listened to this guy. And he was sitting there telling me about the starvation. He was telling me about the poverty. He was telling me about the hunger and the death. And I sat there, and as I sat there and listened to him, I had a hard time believing that. I had a hard time believing that how in the world can something like this happen when we have the means, we have the resources. So I sat there and I listened to him. And at the end of the night, I went up and shook his hand. And I went through the line, real pleasant and everything. I went and shook his hand, and I grabbed his hand, and I said, "Hey, really enjoyed your talk." And he looked me in the eye, and he wouldn't let go of my hand. And he said, "You need to come to Kenya." And I'm like, no disrespect, but I have no intention of going to Kenya. Well, that night, here's the funny thing. That night, I went and sat with him in a Waffle House and had a 2-hour conversation with him. And at the end of that conversation, I had committed myself going to Kenya. And I figured that if this man is telling me the truth, then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take food over. So I started researching some places around the States that I could get some very nutritious food. And we ended up running across a company out of Texas. And long story short, we ended up procuring and buying some food, and we took it over. So I ended up taking about 10,000 meals. And what this is, it's a 2.2 pound bag of food. And in each one of these bags, it's one of these bags that we have sitting here right on our table. And in each of these bags is 50 meals. And it's a nutritious blend of carrots, soy protein, potatoes, but also has all the nutrition value that you need for to sustain life for a day. So I was figuring if I'm going to go to Kenya and I'm going to go prepared. So I ended up getting on the plane, and believe it or not, he met me there at the airport, and he took me around to some places. And the things that I saw were horrible. He took me into some slums. I saw hunger. I saw sickness. I saw poverty. I saw raw sewage flowing through houses. I saw some horrible stuff. But at the end of that 3 days, I went up to him, and his name was Simon. I said, Simon, all these things that you're telling me about the hunger, the starvation, I said, although I've seen some horrible things, I've never seen, and I didn't see these things that you were talking about. And he looked me in the eye. He said, Steve, he said, the place that I'm talking about is up in the northwest corner of Kenya. He said, but we can't go. I said, well, why can't we go? He said, there are no roads. And the roads that they do have, chances are that we'd be attacked by bandits out of Uganda. They would take our vehicle. They might kill us. They might do this and this. He said, so I always charter a plane when I go. So I probably did the most irresponsible thing I've ever done. I pulled out my credit card, and I handed him my credit card, and we chartered a plane. The next day, we were on the ground up in this northwest corner of Kenya, a town called Lodwar. These 4 guys picked me up in a Land Cruiser. They said, are you Steve? I said, I am. They said, come with us. So I kind of thought I got myself into a mess. But for the next couple days, they took me around to these places that they were talking about. And I saw hunger. I saw starvation. I saw death. I held a baby in my arms that was getting ready to die. The next day, he actually passed away. And so we took food up there, and we started to distribute a little bit of this food, and I knew at that point that something had to be done. And it got to the end of the trip, and we were passing out food in this village. And the really cool thing was, it was this old lady, tribal lady, beads, just very tribal, very worn, very tattered. And she kept watching me, and she came up through the line as I was handing up food, and she came up and she looked at me, and she nodded, and she acknowledged, and I gave her some food, and she smiled. Well, at the end of that food distribution, I ended up just sharing a little bit about my personal faith, my testimony, and I told him, I said, God willing, I said, I'll be back with more people and more food. Well, man, it was 5 weeks to the day, literally 5 weeks to the day. I had brought 12 people back to Kenya, went back to the United States, came back, brought 12 people back to Kenya, and I brought more food. And I went to that same village.
This was how long ago?
Oh gosh, this was 10 years ago.
So when did SERV start? Was it?
So SERV
that was the beginning.
SERV started 18 years ago.
Okay.
Yeah. So the really cool thing about this is I went back to that village. The same lady came through the line again, and she recognized me, and she had tears in her eyes. And I asked my interpreter, I said, is she happy because we brought food back? And he said, no, she's happy because you came back and nobody ever comes back. And I knew at that point that I had to do something.
Okay, so Kenya, we know that's in Africa.
Right.
Describe the experience. How long of a flight from Atlanta, Georgia? You guys are based right outside of Atlanta, Georgia.
Correct.
If you were to fly out of Hartsfield Jackson Airport, then where do you go from there, and how long of a flight is it?
Yeah, so it's kind of a crazy process getting there. I mean, there's different routes, but most of the time what we'll do is we'll hop plane in Atlanta. We'll fly into Amsterdam, which is about a 7-8 hour flight. The route we go, have a 2 or 3 hour layover, and then about another 9 to 10 hour flight into the capital city of Kenya, which is Nairobi, centrally located. So it's a process. By the time it's all said and done, you're dealing with a 7 to 8 hour time lapse as far as jet lag and a 20-hour trip.
And once you get to Nairobi, then you are you're jumping into the Land Cruiser?
Yeah, so once we get to Nairobi, we usually spend about a day, and we have a facility there now on the ground that we actually procure food, and we pack out food for our large-scale food distribution. So we'll do that for a day or so. And then we hit it running. We charter a plane. We fly up to that northwest corner of Kenya, where our orphanage is, and we have food shipped up ahead, and we spend probably about 5 to 6 days there.
I think that's an important point. SERV International is committed to a particular group of people, a community in Kenya. This is the lady that was so moved when you came back.
Yeah.
Not that you came back with food, but just that you came back. And that was the most meaningful thing for her. I just want to be sure that we make the point that there is a particular community, a people group there that SERV International is serving, and you have an ongoing long-term relationship with that group.
Exactly. I mean, our goal, I guess you could say, is not to necessarily feed the whole world, because we're not a feeding organization from that standpoint of trying to solve the world hunger problem. But one of the things that we do is we try to go in and we invest in communities. We come alongside of them, and everything that we do starts with food first. So we go in and we bring food to these communities, and then in time that leads to trust of bringing this food, and then it leads to doing wells, and then it leads to bringing in outreach centers and schools and stuff like that. So you go into these places that nobody will ever go. I mean, it's to the ends of the earth, and then just a little bit further. I think you might know what I'm talking about. Right. You probably experienced that once or twice yourself.
Well, there is something very moving about going to the ends of the earth, right, and then going a little bit farther and discovering a wonderful community there. We tend to call them sometimes people groups, because oftentimes they have a culture or a language and traditions that are all their own. Have you found that to be the case with the group in Kenya?
Man, absolutely. I tell people this kind of jokingly, but this is on a serious note. We take a dirt road, which turns into a path, which turns into a trail, and then it's a big open riverbed. And then you go down that riverbed, and when you see the big rock, you take a left, and you head towards the mountain. And that's the people group, and that's the unreached that we go to. And we've developed probably about 5 or 6 communities in different strategic pockets around this area, up near the borders of these countries. And we just keep going back. And we let them know that they're not alone, that we're bringing food. We're a Christian organization, so we do some preaching, or we just kind of share the love of who Christ is in our lives. And around that, like I said, all starts with food. Food first leads to everything else. So when I have these interviews on the Edge of Adventure podcast, and I speak to people like yourself who are leading an organization that is doing relief work, humanitarian work of some kind, I always like to dig a little bit deeper and maybe get to the motivation. And the motivation is different for different people. Right. But for you and for the team with SERV International, in a nutshell, why are you doing what you're doing? I never started off wanting to do SERV International. I think that's kind of important. I own my own business. I've had my own company for 26 years, run an export company that sends product all over the world, and graduated college. And man, I was just going to go in, and I felt like God had given me a gift to do business, and I was just going to go in and make that difference and make my mark. Well, after about 5 years into the business of being successful, we started having a little bit of money rolling in, a little bit of resources coming in. I started to think to myself that, although all these material things are great, I just had this void in me. And this void was just this whole sense of needing that there was something more. And I remember sitting there thinking, God, if this is all there is to life, is just making my money and being successful on what the world says, then I'm missing something. And man, it was crazy. About 2 days after that happened, I got a call from a guy in a church that I knew. And he said, Steve, he says, you own your own international business company, right? I said, yeah. And he said, well, you're the most qualified because we need to lead a team of people to Mexico on a mission trip. And I said, well, so I looked at it, talked to my wife about it. And, next month I was leading a team of 12 guys down into Mexico doing missions. And that's where it all really started for me. Just that need of having to find something more. not being satisfied with the status quo and using your resources to make bigger needs and make an impact in the world, to go to those places where others wouldn't go, and to make an impact, and to see with my own eyes, and to be able to then. We went into Mexico for the next 3 years and continued to take teams, and we built outreach centers and feeding program facilities and stuff like that.
Currently, what are the areas of the world that SERV International serves?
Currently serves?
Correct.
Right now, we're serving in the Dominican. We just finished up a program in Costa Rica, Kenya, which is our big one, and then 2 years ago, we just launched a really good program into Cambodia. And we're actually...
Tell me about that.
Yeah, man, we're actually using food as a platform to go in and using it as a prevention of sex trafficking. So we ended up putting a container of food into Cambodia last year. A container of food is 1 million meals, a shipping container like you see on the roads and stuff. And it's 1 million meals, 20,000 bags of food. And so we ship that over there. And what we do is we go in and we use it as the prevention and the education part of sex trafficking.
So that's something that you guys have been doing now for 2 years, right?
Correct, 2 years.
So how often are you over there? I think I saw recently you guys were over there.
Yeah, we returned from a trip from Africa, and then about 3 weeks later we were on a trip to Cambodia. So we just got back probably about 6 weeks ago. But it was an amazing trip. Went over there. We're just really trying to figure out who our partners are. We're really trying to figure out where the best need is. And we've been doing a lot of research. We've got some great partners on the ground. We're working with an organization over there called Saving Susan, and they go right into these places, into these slums, and they identify these girls, they identify these kids, and it's actually an American organization.
All right, so tell me then how the container of food, 1 million meals, right?
Right.
Tell me how that factors in to rescuing someone from the sex trade.
You know, the sad thing is, in parts of Cambodia, people are so hungry that you wouldn't necessarily think that, or you wouldn't really get your mind around that, but they're so hungry that they're actually selling their children and giving their children into sex trafficking and sex slavery. And a lot of times they're doing it to put food on the table. So our thought behind that was, if we went in and we brought this food, then what we can do is we could use this food and go into isolated communities. Again, we're not there to try to save the whole country of Cambodia, but to places that we identify and that we work with, we'll go in and educate them, give them food, set some goals, set some standards, and set some criteria for them, and then continually use that so they don't have to sell their children into sex slavery, and then educate them in the process. So it's a slow process, but we're finding that we're getting good results with it right now.
So talk to me about the strategy then of working with one group or one community and staying there long term versus taking the same number of meals, distributing them perhaps more broadly or to a larger group or larger area. Why is it important to SERV International to work in a community and to stay there for a longer period of time?
Well, it's important. It's important because you have to have the credibility. You have to have the sustainability. And when you're going into a foreign country and you're going into these places and these villages, they want to know you're trying to build that trust. So they want to know that you're not going to just be there on a one-time basis, but that you are going to keep going back. So every time that we go back and we bring food, we earn a little bit more of that credibility. And over time, then what happens is we start to adopt that community in different ways. Again, it all starts with food, but then leads to so much more. Now, that does not mean that we're not going to help out along the way in other places by giving food, but we just can't invest in every community that we come across. So we have partners on the ground there that kind of strategically lead us and say, hey, you know, Steve, this is where we want to be. This is what we're thinking. This is what the program we've got in place, and you have that missing piece. And you know, food is used for so many different things. I mean, not only just to feed the body, but it's amazing how many people around the world are just hungry.
Yeah. Okay. SERV International, online at serv1.org.
Correct.
And SERV is not, there's no E in it, so it's SERV one.org.
Correct.
And that's what I'm looking here on my laptop at the moment. Looking here, and I see you've got a section about food, but you've also got a section about water and a section about shelter.
Right.
Walk me through the water initiatives and the shelter projects.
So really the water and the shelter kind of just stemmed from the original vision that was given years ago. Like I said, everything, I keep saying this, but everything comes back to starting with food. So when we went into these areas, give you an example of just Kenya, when we went up to Lodwar in the Turkana region, up near those borders, our whole purpose and focus was, distributing this food. And so we did mass distributions, focused in on a couple of these communities. But man, the need is so real for so many different things. So bringing in the food gave us the credibility, earned us the right to come alongside these people with the trust factor. And as they did, we would go back and we would tell them, say, hey, we need you to continue to pray about and continue to think about what it would look like for us to put a well in here, in these areas. And man, we would have people walk 8 to 10 miles, literally, just to show up for food distribution. And when we go into this area of food distribution, there may have been 1 or 2 huts around there, and that was it. And then people would show up for this distribution. But as you start to bring food and as you start to bring water, communities are built. So when you put in a well in a place, you go back 6 months later, and now there's probably what was 2 to 3 huts, these grass thatch huts. There's probably 20 to 30 around there. And then as that continues to grow over time, we bring the food, we continue to make sure the well's going, we sink a borehole, a well in there. And then once that community grows, we come in maybe the next year and we get partners to come alongside of us and fund an education piece of that or a church aspect of that where we'll build a building. And then pretty soon, within a 2-year period, you go from an area that has 8 to 10 people to a thriving community of 300 or 400. And that's where we like to kind of put our focus, and we continue to maintain that. But then we'll pack up our bags and we'll go another, 15, 20 miles down the road, and we'll start the same.
In Kenya, the name of the group again, the people group that you work with is what?
They're the Turkana. It's the Turkana Tribe.
Okay.
Turkana. Turkana.
Are they based there, or are they in a variety or a wider region?
No,
of Kenya?
they are up in that northwest corner of Kenya. It's the Turkana Tribe. It's the Turkana district. Different people groups, different tribal groups. And those are the people that we really felt that God was leading us to start with and to make a difference in their lives.
Would you say they have lived a fairly isolated life?
Very isolated. There is a town, but once you get a couple miles or even a mile out of town, I mean, it's ridiculous. It's remote. It's probably some of the most remote area I've seen. I traveled the world a good bit, but desolate, remote. Looks kind of like Arizona in the hottest of hot.
What's their reaction when you roll up in a vehicle of some sort? They may be used to it now, but I imagine in the early days, was that something they had seen before?
At some point, anybody who's probably over 10 or 12 has seen that. But yeah, there were times when we would show up. And of course, the white people, they were the Mzungus. So they call us the Mzungus. And people would just start yelling and screaming, the Mzungus. And these kids, when you get up in the vehicles and you get out of the vehicles, they would just run from you.
They would run from you.
Absolutely,
okay.
The smaller ones. Of course, we have a good team of people on the ground there, so we go in ahead of time and we preface it, and they know that we're coming. But even at that, it's an experience that you'll never forget.
It's something very unusual for them in their tribe and in their community.
Absolutely.
But then if so some of the older ones who have seen you guys before and know what this is about, how did they receive you when you arrive?
The very first time? Or?
No, since then, when you guys go back and you're like, if you were to go now, how are you going to be received?
Oh man, it's family. It's relationships. They may not know us, or we may not know all of them for names, but we always recognize faces. The welcome is overwhelming. They're hospitable. They go out of their way to give us the small things that they have. They'll give us trinkets. They'll give us. I got a goat leg, not the whole goat, but I got a goat leg one time.
Pretty good.
And and they make all these little trinkets for us. They make these little brooms and little things, and they give the best of what they have, even when they don't have anything to give. And it very just teaches it just touches you down in the very pit of your soul.
Okay, so do you ever stop and think the next time you're there, or perhaps the last time you were there, do you ever stop and think, what did you do to possibly have arrived at a point in your life where you roll up into a community like that and they love you? What does that feel like?
It's very humbling, but I think the fact of we just showed up. The very first time is we just showed up when others wouldn't show up. And again, I've said this, but this is the most remote of the remote. And when we show up for that first time or that 20th time, man, they're just so appreciative. They're so appreciative of anything that we have or that we give them, or just being in community with them. There'll be times when we go there for no purpose, but just to sit around the fire with them, and just to be present with them, and just to be in community with them. And the relationships that are built, you have two different languages, you have two different cultures, and we always hear people refer to them as, oh, those people. Well, those people are people. And just like me and you, and they've got families, they've got kids, they've got struggles, they've got issues. It's just their stuff is different. And we'll sit around a fire at night, and we'll sit there, and they'll talk to us, and through an interpreter, they'll share their stories, they'll share their goals, their joys, their sorrows, and just to be in presence of them, and to know that we're all one people. We just look different, and we just come from different areas, but God designed us all the same.
So we are actually recording this on site at your headquarters outside of Atlanta, Georgia.
Right.
And for those who are watching on YouTube, you can see the room that we're in is adorned with some beautiful pictures. And we won't go through all of them, but like this main one right here behind us here. What's the story? Who are these people? And
so
what
you're actually looking at is, you're looking at poles coming up out of the ground, and you're looking at some thatch roof with a little bit of tin on it, and that's their church. So the man that you see standing right behind me in the middle of this picture, his name is Pastor Jackson. And this man will walk for days at a time because of the calling that God has on his life, and he'll go to these unreached people, and he'll just show up, and he'll pray with them, and he'll give them the hope of who Christ is in their lives. And we developed this relationship with this man. He is now actually part of SERV International in Turkana, and we supplement him a little bit. Not much, but we supplement him a little bit each month, and it allows him to buy food and new shoes. And he walks, and he goes, and he engages in these communities. He's an amazing man.
So another picture, which you obviously, if you're listening to the podcast, you can't see it. But even from the shot that we have for YouTube, you can't see this one. We'll take a picture, though. Before we leave, I want to take a picture, make sure that we post this on theedgeofadventure.com so that you can go to the site and see this. But tell me now, what is that? This is, it looks like an aerial shot of, is that the base?
Yeah, actually what you're looking at here is it's an aerial shot of our orphanage. It sits on 33 acres, and we have a compound within that 33 acres of a 7 acre area that's fenced in, and we have 67 children to date. That we've brought in. We started off with 15. We continually grew that, and we always took the philosophy that you've got to be better before you get bigger. And we offer out child sponsorships to them for $55 a month. And then we have people within the community here back in Atlanta, around the United States. People are able to go on our website and actually sponsor one of these kids. And what we do is we ask them for a 1-year commitment on it, and we show up back in Kenya probably at least 3 or 4 times a year. And in the process of that, we bring letters, we bring pictures, we exchange stuff back and forth. But the shot that you're looking at there is our orphanage. That has a school on it. We educate our kids all the way up till age 6th grade. different ages, obviously, but up to 6th grade there, and then they go to school outside the community after that.
So again, the price point to sponsor one of those children in the orphanage there is what again?
Yeah, it's $55 per month, but that's all in. I mean, that's their food, that's their health, that's their education, that's part of the staff that takes care of them. For 67 kids, we have over 20 staff, right about 20 staff, and that feed into them every day. And the $55 a month covers all the expenses, total care facility.
So for those listening, I simply want to encourage them to go to the website, check it out. It's a beautiful website, and the stories here, obviously, as you listen to Steve, as he shares, you when you go to the website, you're going to see something very much in keeping with that. It's a great site, and you will be able there there's a button here that says donate.
Correct.
There's also the sponsor a child, and that's where you would be able to go and sponsor a child.
Oh yeah, we've got complete bios, pictures, their story online. Each one of those kids have a story, and there's a reason that they're there up in this area. It's a very remote, tough area to live in. People, their parents have died of typhoid, malaria, dysentery, violence, post-election violence, cattle rustling. I mean, everything that you could think of. Mostly the area up there is nomad, so they're very much goat herders, cattle herders, stuff like that. But yeah, everybody has a story that's in this orphanage.
Are there other ways that someone could give and be supportive of SERV International? Obviously, they could make a financial donation. They could sign up for 1 year at a time, $55 a month, and sponsor a child. Other opportunities, what comes to mind?
Well, other opportunities, I mean, we actually lead probably 3 to 4 teams a year going to Africa that will, our staff will take a team. It's 12 days. We do that. But, one of the things I would say is not only can you do it through child sponsorship or providing funding for a well to help with these communities or a church or even taking a trip with SERV International, but just to get familiar with the process of who we are and to go to our website and just kind of take a look. What we do is we have a few business partners actually that come alongside of us, and they help to cover our overhead and expenses. The one cool thing about what we've done and we've been able to maintain for over 18 years now is that we're actually 100% pass-through. So what I mean by that is if somebody goes online and gives $10, all $10 of that goes back into our actual mission and ministry of what we do.
How is that happening?
Well, we've got a few, not only my company, but we have a few other companies that come alongside of us on monthly donation. They help cover the overhead and expenses. Right. And again, that allows us to be passed through. But
that's actually a huge deal. I mean, that means, to your point, you can give $10 and all 10 is going to help feed the kids in
and it's
Kenya.
A good problem to have, but we are having the problem now too that we're continuing to grow so fast, and we're not able to sustain the overhead and expenses. So we're always looking for those individual partners, those business partners that come alongside. And then, of course, we give them shout outs, and we do a lot to put back into their marketing and everything else. Okay. So it's not just a give and take, it's a partnership.
Okay, so who are some of the companies you should give a shout out to right now?
Vector Global, My Smart T-shirts. Vector Global owns they actually own a container company, and what they'll do is they'll donate $8 to $10 for every container they ship anywhere in the world, and it goes back into feeding people around the globe. We have a guy called My Smart Shirts, local guy out of Atlanta here. He's been a partner forever. For every T-shirt that he moves or he sells, he donates and feeds one person per T-shirt. So over the course of time, these companies have really come alongside of us and engaged with us, and
it makes a big deal. It makes a big difference.
Does.
Yeah. So what we'll also do, again, back to my website, theedgeofadventure.com.
Right.
Go there. You'll be able to see, we'll have a post about this. You'll be able to listen to the podcast there on the blog post.
Right.
But I would like, before I get out of here today, I want you to be sure that I get a list of those organizations that have been supportive of you guys, and we'll put a link on there as well. So
absolutely,
if someone's listening and they want to just thank those companies or find out more, perhaps they want to look at the possibility of having their company come alongside you guys, they can find out more about that by contacting you guys and see who else is doing that. Okay, so as we get close to the end here of our time today on the Edge of Adventure podcast, talk to me about SERV International's next big initiative. What do we need people to think about right now?
I think one of the things that we're really gearing up to is, we started it, but we're gearing up towards the Cambodia initiative. We're gearing up towards larger food scale distribution in Kenya. The need continues to grow. Right now, as I mentioned earlier before, too, we want to be better before we get bigger. So the amount of growth that we're able to is really unlimited in Kenya. The projects that we're doing in Cambodia. So I would say that the things that we're gearing up towards for the next phase is really making sure that we can get invested and do what we do well in Cambodia. And it looks a little bit different, obviously, than what we do in Kenya. Different area, different region, and different needs. And I think one of the things that I had to realize is the need's not the same everywhere in the world. So you have to be very careful, because our goal is not to come in and change what they're doing, but to actually walk alongside of them and not implement what we see as Americans into their culture. We always want to be sensitive to that, and then try to find the best ways that we can to walk alongside of them, empower the people there, and bring them in as partners.
One of your favorite stories regarding SERV International?
Oh, man. I think one of my favorite stories is how it actually started. And if you allow me, I want to tell you this just real quick. But I had an opportunity in the beginning years to take a team of 18 guys down to the jungles of Venezuela. And so long story short, we ended up getting on a plane. We flew into Ciudad Bolivar down in Venezuela. Ended up flying to another town about 2 or 3 hours away, and then we took a bus for about 4 hours along this road, and then all of a sudden it just dead-ended. I mean, it literally dead-ended at a river. And we spent the night there at the end of that road. The next morning, we ended up getting up and taking about a 6 to 8 hour boat ride in dugout canoes into the jungle. We were doing some dental work. We were doing we had a few doctors with us. But one of the things is, man, when you say jungles of Venezuela, you're talking crocodile, you're talking anacondas, piranha, and then a few other things you probably haven't seen. But you probably know about some of those stories, right? But the one thing that was really cool about this is, at the end of the day, before we ended up coming back down the river, this chief of this tribe wanted to show us the jungle, and he was very proud of his surroundings. So we ended up walking out into the jungle, man. The trees, the monkeys, the vines, everything just, right there. But there's one thing that you don't want to run across in the jungle of Venezuela, and it's about a 4-foot snake. It's called a four-nose. Within about 20-30 minutes, you're probably gone. About 20 or 30 minutes. And I remember looking up, and I stepped across this log. And as I stepped across this log, I was sitting there looking up, and I caught the chief's eyes, and his eyes looked at mine, and I looked at him, and he looked at me, and he looked down at my boots, and I looked down, and there was this four-nosed snake slithering across my boots. And as that snake came across my boot, he turned around to coil. And as he turned around to coil and strike, this man and a sugarcane pole came flying out of nowhere, and took that snake and slung him about 20 feet and beat that snake up and down one side or the other. And I was sitting here thinking, okay, God, did you really bring me out here just to bring an end to all this? I mean, there was this snake, it was getting ready to strike, and now, so it kind of messed me up a little bit. But we ended up getting back downstream, and I went to bed that night, and I was slinging in my hammock, had my mosquito net over me. And man, I would remember waking up the next morning to all the sounds of the screech monkeys, all the insects and everything. But I just had this peace inside of me that was just beyond anything I'd ever experienced. And I felt like God was just talking to my soul and just saying that, hey, Steve, you're to start a ministry. And if you seek my face in everything that you do, I'll always continue to take care of your needs. And, I think I did what anybody reasonable person would do at that point. And I really just kind of turned around and ran for about 6 months, and didn't really want to do that.
Yeah.
But, as I say, I'm still seeking his face 18 years later, and God continues to take care of our needs and expands it daily.
Okay, so two more questions and then we'll wrap it up. How would you challenge people out there in terms of seeking adventure and purpose? How would you challenge us?
Again, because of my belief and because of my faith, I think God created us all with that sense of adventure, especially us guys. And I think so many times we get stuck in our jobs, we get stuck in our routines, we get stuck in these situations that we feel we can't get out of. But just to step out, sometimes when it doesn't make sense, but to step out and to find an organization, whether it's SERV or other organizations or whatever, to challenge yourself to go out of your normal and to go into that sense of adventure. And when you're traveling overseas or you're traveling to some place that has that slight edge of danger, whatever, something just comes alive in us. And it's amazing what stepping outside of your normal will do. For me, I think it's sometimes going to the edges of the earth, like we talk about, and then a little bit further. That's my excitement. And I love to bring people into that atmosphere and to help create that opportunity for them to see what I see through missions and through adventure and through traveling. And that's where I'm at, man. I'm just ready.
Well, we're talking today with Steve Kasha, who is the CEO and the founder of SERV International. You can look him up online at serv1.org. And again, that's spelled SERV, and then you spell out the word one, ONE.org, serv1.org. And we're going to just wrap up, Steve. I guess what I would like for you to do is address the people out there who have been significant in the past 18 years for SERV International, the people who have helped you to make this organization work and tick. If you speak to them all in one group, what would you say to them?
Yeah, I would tell them, I think I would have to come alongside and just say that, there's different seasons in our lives. And whether it's personally or whether it's through an organization like SERV, that every person has played their part in who SERV is and what SERV is today. We've taken the beginning stages of growth into creating not only the mission and the outreach side, but then you have a business side that comes along that. And each person that has come along over the past 18 years has played a significant role in helping us to get to where we are. And one season would not happen without the other. One thing I think that the reason why we are where we are today is, man, I'm very blessed that both of my parents are still alive, and they're both 78 years old, and they used to travel with me all over the world doing things. But now as age kind of creeps up, they always stay back, and they're the ones who continue to pray for the organization and to continue to encourage me and be my biggest fans and biggest supporters. And your parents are always going to have a significant role. It doesn't matter how old you are. But they're always going to have an influence in your life. And I think that they're the type of people that just sit back and just do what they do and never expect anything in return. And I just appreciate them more than they would ever know.
Well, of course, Steve, you know this very well. Anytime you might have someone like yourself who is very much the leader and the figurehead of an organization, and we need those kinds of people. You have to have that.
Right.
But there are always, behind a successful organization, some like SERV International, there's a lot of people, friends, donors, other members of the staff. They've been there through the years to help make this thing go round.
Right.
And we need them in those type of organizations. So not everybody is called to be the figurehead. It takes a lot of servants who are willing to serve and give and maybe never, not even once, be brought to the forefront.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I've got a great team of people around me. Jim Vineyard, Kathy Alford, Robin Stewart, Whitney Brown. I mean, people that do the day-to-day, which allows me to go out and have coffees and to have conversations and to continue to just share the vision of where SERV is and where it's going.
So, again, I keep threatening to wrap up, but I have one last request of you, and you're a fan of this quote here, which it happens to mean a lot to me that you do, and I would be remiss if I didn't have you record that in your voice before we get out of here. So, if you don't mind.
Yeah, we are destined for more than routine. We are called to explore and discover and make positive difference in the lives of others. We find ourselves on the edge of adventure with a decision to make, and we choose to live beyond status quo.
And with that, we're going to wrap up the show. Brother Steve, appreciate you.
Man,
love you, brother.
I appreciate you, and thanks for all you do.
Well, thank you.
I love following you every day.
Well, thank you, and thanks to everybody listening and those watching on YouTube. For more information to get to know Steve Kasha and SERV International a little bit better, please go online to theedgeofadventure.com. There's more information there. We're going to put those links, some of those organizations that have supported you so faithfully. So we'll do all that, and in the meantime, we're going to get out of here. God bless everybody, and we'll see you again soon. Thanks, Steve.
Thank you.